The Children Who Ran Before Dawn.
Chapter 3. Welcome back, mis chacales. I have lived for nearly 170 years. That is long enough to learn that mortals have a very strange relationship with time. You speak of life as though it were abundant, then surrender entire years to people you despise, duties you never chose, and arguments no one will remember. You create ambitions large enough to require generations, yet many of you cannot remember the promises you made before supper. You plan for decades. You remember for seasons. Kingdoms build monuments to eternity, while forgetting the dead before the mortar has dried. Families repeat the wounds of their fathers, rename them tradition, and act surprised when the children bleed in familiar places. Such short memories, such enormous plans. I once counted the years carefully. Birthdays mattered when I believed age was a road that led somewhere. Later, the numbers became too large and the graves too numerous. So I began counting other things. Names, faces, the final words of people who believed they still had time to choose better ones. Yet certain hours have never faded. They remain untouched while entire decades rot around them. I can no longer tell you what coat I wore during some revolutions. I have forgotten the names of governors who believed the world would preserve every speech they made. But I remember the smell of warm bean broth in a room beneath a stable. I remember the weight of a frightened girl's hand. I remember the sound of a door that had not closed correctly. The morning we escaped the mesón lasted only a few hours. At the time, those hours seemed large enough to contain the rest of our lives. They contained considerably less. I remember the second meal. I remember how hunger made poor food taste merciful. And I remember the mistake we were meant to discover after it. The second meal arrived while the night was beginning to weaken. Not morning, not yet, but that exhausted hour when darkness loses some of its weight and every lamp appears tired of defending itself. I had not slept so much as fallen in and out of the same shallow dream. Each time I opened my eyes, the lantern hung a little lower, the stones appeared a little closer, and Esteban's mother was still singing somewhere above us. Her voice passed through timber, packed earth and limestone, until the words were gone, and only the sorrow remained. Sometimes grief does not require language. Sometimes the body recognizes it before the mind knows whose mother is crying. Marisol had fallen asleep sitting against the wall. The little girl with the loose braid rested against her side, one small hand curled inside the fabric of Marisol's dress. Mateo sat near the hidden staircase with his knees pulled beneath his chin. His lips moved whenever footsteps crossed the stable overhead, though no sound came out. He had been counting for so long that the numbers no longer needed his voice. The scarred boy lay on the opposite side of the room with his back toward us. I could not tell whether he was sleeping or merely refusing to let us see him awake. The younger boy in the oversized shirt had eaten the last of his bread before sleep took him. His fingers were still closed around the empty space where it had been. Hunger had trained him to hold food, even after his hand no longer contained any. It had trained all of us in smaller ways. Children are often praised for adapting quickly. Adults rarely admit what they are adapting to. A bolt shifted above us. Mateo stopped counting. Marisol opened her eyes before the wall moved. The little girl woke with her and immediately tightened her grip. The scarred boy rolled onto one elbow. None of us spoke as the hidden section of stone pulled inward. Doña Brígida descended carrying a wooden tray balanced against one hip. Steam drifted from a clay bowl at its center. Behind her came the golden-eyed man, bending slightly beneath the low entrance. The shadows accepted him more naturally than the lantern did. Doña Brígida lowered the tray to the floor. The meal was better than the first. Thin bean broth with pieces of squash, 6 small tortillas wrapped in cloth, a little salt folded inside paper, and a cup of watered goat's milk for the youngest among us. The smell entered the room before the tray touched the stones. Every stomach answered it. Even the scarred boy's shoulders tightened. It was not generous. It only felt generous because our bodies had forgotten what enough looked like.
"You promised another meal," Marisol said.
"And here it is," the golden-eyed man answered. "You said before we slept. I did not say how long you would sleep." Doña Brígida gave him a narrow look. He appeared not to notice. He was studying the room instead. Mateo near the wall, the scarred boy watching through half-lowered eyes. The 2 smaller children, Marisol, and finally, me. His attention did not feel like concern. It felt like inventory. He was not merely counting children. He was measuring what hunger had made of each one. Mateo watched the door instead of the food. Marisol watched the food instead of him. The scarred boy watched both. I watched the golden-eyed man. The younger children watched whichever face appeared least dangerous. Marisol reached for the tray. Doña Brígida caught her wrist. "Wait until we leave." The golden-eyed man lowered his gaze toward the woman's fingers. Doña Brígida released Marisol. He had not spoken. He did not need to. "You have until the first bell," he said. "After that, you will be prepared for the road." "What road?" I asked. "The same road everyone travels." "That is not an answer." "No. But you continue collecting those." I hated the way he answered questions without surrendering anything. Years later, I discovered that powerful men often mistake vagueness for wisdom. He was different. He used vagueness as a locked drawer. He turned toward the stairs. Doña Brígida followed and lifted the lantern from its hook, leaving only the smaller flame beside the water jar. Before the wall closed, the golden-eyed man paused beside the wooden peg controlling the mechanism. His fingers settled against it. He looked into the room once more. His gaze passed over Mateo, then Marisol, then me. His thumb moved against the peg. The stone slid into place. For several moments, no one moved. We listened to Doña Brígida's steps climb away. Mateo counted them under his breath. 12. A pause. 13. Then the sound disappeared into the stable above us. Marisol crawled toward the food and divided the tortillas without being asked. She gave the first piece to the little girl beside her. She dipped another into the broth for the younger boy and waited until it cooled before placing it in his hands. The boy ate too quickly. Marisol touched his wrist. Slow. He shook his head. There is more. Not for me. For everyone. He stared at the bowl, as though it might vanish while she spoke. She tore his tortilla in half and placed one piece beneath the cloth. There. Now it cannot run away. The boy looked at her. Then he began eating more slowly. Mateo accepted his portion, but continued listening toward the stairs. The scarred boy did not reach for anything. Marisol looked at him. You should eat. So should you. I am not enough to make you slow. Marisol glanced at the bowl. You think they put something in it? They waited until we were tired. That is not poison. Food makes you sleep. Marisol looked at the steam rising from the broth. Being hungry makes you weak. Being asleep makes you easy. Neither of them looked away. Then Marisol lifted the bowl and drank. Then I will be difficult when I wake up. The scarred boy watched her swallow. After a moment, he took his tortilla. He had been right. The broth had not been drugged. It did not need to be. Warmth settled into our stomachs, loosened our shoulders, and made the cold stones feel less hostile beneath us. Our eyelids grew heavy. The little girl began leaning against Marisol before she finished her milk. Mateo's counting slowed. The younger boy tried to hide the remaining piece of tortilla inside his shirt. Marisol pretended not to notice. A body that has spent too long frightened may collapse the moment it is given permission to feel safe. The permission does not have to be real. Marisol insisted that someone remain awake. Mateo volunteered first. He said he had already learned the sounds above us. The stable door dragged before it opened. The kitchen door clicked twice. The chain on the courtyard gate struck stone whenever the wind moved it. Doña Brígida stepped harder with her left foot. He recited each detail quickly, afraid someone might take the duty away from him. He said it as though knowledge could keep sleep from touching him. Wake me after 10 openings of the stable door, Marisol told him. Mateo frowned. What if it does not open 10 times? Then wake me before morning. How will I know? The dark will stop being dark. Mateo looked toward the stone ceiling. I cannot see the sky. Marisol lay down beside the little girl. Then wake me before you fall asleep. Mateo considered this. How will I know that? You will stop asking questions. I almost laughed. The sound remained somewhere inside me. Laughter still felt dangerous in that room. The younger boy curled beside the folded blankets with his hidden tortilla pressed against his ribs. I tried to remain awake with Mateo. The heat from the broth spread through my chest and made the floor feel softer than stone had any right to feel. I watched this small flame beside the water jar. It bent whenever air moved beneath the door. Each time it straightened, my eyes closed a little longer. Above us, Esteban's mother stopped singing. The silence left behind was worse. A chair scraped across the floor. Water poured into a basin. Men began speaking about burial. The Republican sergeant wanted the imperial coat left on the body because it belonged in the record. A stable worker told him the coat was soaked through. The sergeant said the condition did not matter. The uniform proved which side had possessed the dead boy when he fell. Esteban's mother answered that her son would not be buried wearing the coat of men who had dragged him from his father's field. Someone reminded her that Esteban had carried an imperial rifle. She said he had carried whatever they put in his hands because he wanted to come home alive. The sergeant said history would not record intentions. Esteban's mother said history had not raised him. Mateo listened to every word. I listened until the voices entered my dreams. In those dreams, my father wore Esteban's blue coat. He stood in the middle of our burning house with the revolver beside him, while a man seated at the table asked which army had owned him when he died. My mother shouted that he had a name before anyone gave him a side. The man dipped his pen into blood and asked her to spell it. She opened her mouth. Esteban's mother answered instead. I woke with my cheek against the floor. The lantern had burned low enough to turn the room amber. Mateo was slumped beside the wall. His eyes were open, but only barely. How long? I whispered. He blinked at me. How long have you been awake? I do not know. You were counting. His face tightened. I lost it. That frightened him more than any sound above us. Mateo did not count merely to measure the world. He counted to keep a part of the world inside himself. A number could not strike him. A number could not lie about why it had entered the room. A number remained what it was, even when adults wanted something different. Losing the count felt like losing the only door they had not locked. Start again, I said. From where? From one. He drew a breath. His lips moved. 1, 2. A cold line of air crossed my hand. I looked toward the hidden wall. The smaller flame leaned toward the seam between the stones. I crawled closer and placed my fingers against it. There was a gap no wider than the edge of a coin. Through it came the smells of hay, leather, horse sweat, and the dying night. Mateo stopped counting again. The peg did not catch. Marisol's voice came from behind us. What? She sat up with her hair pressed against one cheek. Her eyes were swollen from interrupted sleep. The moment she saw us beside the wall, exhaustion disappeared from her face. Mateo pressed one palm against the stone. It did not close all the way. The scared boy spoke without rising. Do not touch it. Marisol looked back. Why? Because they want us to. You do not know that. Yes, I do. His certainty settled over the room. Marisol pushed one fingernail into the opening and tested it. The wall moved beneath the pressure. The scarred boy stood. Leave it. It opens. It can close. Then we get through before it does. And when they are waiting upstairs, you talk like you want to stay. The scared boy's hand rose to his damaged cheek. I talk like someone who knows what comes after running. The little girl woke and moved immediately toward Marisol. The younger boy sat up too quickly and struck the back of his head against the wall. He made a small sound, but did not cry. Children learned quickly which noises brought adults and which noises made adults angry when they arrived. Marisol looked at the two smaller children. Then she looked at me. What do you think? I think he's right. Her expression changed. The scarred boy looked almost relieved. I placed my fingers against the gap again. I also think they are moving us after the first bell. So we leave before they move us. Marisol's mouth almost formed a smile. The scarred boy did not share it. People like them do not leave doors open by mistake. Mateo leaned closer to the seam. Maybe he did not close it right. I remembered the golden-eyed man's fingers resting on the peg. I remembered his thumb moving. He left it this way. The room became silent. Mateo looked from me to the wall. Why? I watched the flame bending toward the opening. He wants to see if we try. Marisol placed her palm against the stone. Then let him watch. At that age, Marisol believed that recognizing a trap made her less vulnerable to it. I believed suspicion itself could protect me. The scarred boy believed every open door was merely another kind of cage. Mateo believed that if he counted carefully enough, the cage would reveal its shape. None of us was entirely wrong. That was the dangerous part. Mateo showed Marisol where he believed the internal latch rested. She emptied the water from the dry clay cup and struck its rim against the floor. The sound made the younger children flinch. Marisol selected the longest curved piece and pushed it into the gap. Clay scraped against stone. The noise seemed loud enough to travel through the entire mesón. The scarred boy pulled a blanket from the floor and pressed it around the edge of the wall. Marisol looked at him. If you are doing this, be quiet. I knew you would help. No, you did not. Mateo guided the clay beneath the latch. Marisol lifted. I pressed my shoulder against the stone. The little girl held the blanket tightly around the edge to muffle the scraping. The younger boy watched the stairs and raised one finger whenever he heard movement above. The latch resisted. Again, Marisol whispered. We pushed together. Something clicked inside the wall. The stone moved inward. Cold air filled the room. The little girl closed her eyes and breathed it in. It was only stable air. Dust, horses. To us, it smelled like the entire world. Beyond the opening, the narrow staircase rose into darkness. No lantern waited at the top. No adult called for us to stop. That frightened me more than shouting would have. Marisol pointed at the little girl. She comes behind me. Mateo nodded. I will count the stairs. The scarred boy looked toward the room behind us. Are you staying? I asked. I should. Marisol stepped into the opening. Then stay. The scarred boy watched her place one foot on the first stair. For a moment, he appeared younger than the scar made him look. Not brave. Not hardened. Only a boy deciding which loneliness frightened him more. Then he took the younger child by the arm and followed. He knew the door was bait. He entered it anyway, because he was not yet willing to remain behind alone. Mateo counted beneath his breath as we climbed. 1, 2, 3. The steps were narrow and damp near the wall. The stone pressed cold through my trousers whenever I raised my knee. The little girl breathed too loudly behind Marisol. Marisol reached back and squeezed her fingers once. Mateo continued counting. 16, 17. On the 18th, his hand reached the stable floor. Marisol lifted the hidden panel only far enough to look through. Empty. The scarred boy shook his head. It only looks empty. She pushed the panel wider. The stable appeared larger without people inside it. 7 stalls lined the far wall. Most of the horses were gone, taken for the funeral procession or the road. One gray mare remained. She shifted her weight and watched us with one dark eye. Her ears turned toward every sound we made. Mateo pointed toward the rear. Kitchen door, courtyard door, grain room. Marisol looked at him. Which one? Mateo hesitated. The scarred boy whispered, the one farthest from the people. We crossed toward the grain room. A latch lifted somewhere beyond the stable. Marisol pushed the little girl behind the stack of feed sacks. I pulled Mateo down beside an empty trough. The scarred boy covered the younger boy's mouth with one hand. The kitchen door opened. A stable worker entered carrying a lantern and an armful of white cloth. He crossed without looking toward us. He placed the cloth over a wooden cart near the courtyard doors. One corner slipped free. Beneath it, I saw the outline of a human foot. Esteban. His mother entered behind the worker. She carried the imperial coat folded over one arm. Take that card outside. Senora, the sergeant said we should wait. The sergeant did not give birth to him. The worker looked toward the kitchen. He wants the coat left on the body. Then he may wear it himself. She pulled back the cloth. Esteban's face was pale beneath the lantern, younger in death than he had appeared when they carried him inside. Someone had washed the blood from his mouth. A faint red line remained beside one nostril. His hair was still wet. His mother touched one brass button still fastened near his throat. He was my son before he belonged to any emperor. The stable worker lowered his eyes. Together they removed the coat. The little girl beside Marisol stared through the space between the sacks. Marisol turned her face away from the body and covered the child's eyes. The little girl held Marisol's wrist. She did not pull it away. More voices approached from the kitchen. Marisol motioned for us to move deeper into the grain room. We crossed one at a time, while Esteban's mother folded the white cloth around him. She began saying his name. Esteban. She covered his shoulders. Esteban. She touched his hair. Esteban. She said it as though each repetition returned one small piece of him to her. Perhaps it did. We slipped through the grain room door and closed it without sound. The room smelled of maize dust, dried chilies and onions hanging from the rafters. Crates crowded the walls. A narrow window stood open above a stack of barrels. Iron bars crossed its frame. Marisol tested them. They did not move. Too small, the scarred boy said. Mateo examined the other door. This goes to the pantry.
How do you know?
Marisol asked.
I smelled bread whenever it opened.
Marisol looked at him.
You count smells too? No. Good. That would be strange.
Mateo almost smiled. It disappeared when footsteps entered the grain room behind us. We moved toward the pantry door. It was locked. The handle turned once beneath Marisol's hand and stopped. The door behind us opened. Window, I whispered. The bars, Mateo said. I looked beneath them. The wooden frame had rotted away from one lower corner. Marisol climbed onto the barrels and pulled at it. The wood cracked. Lantern light stretched across the floor behind us. The scarred boy climbed beside Marisol and forced his fingers into the broken frame. Together they tore one section free. "The little ones first," Marisol said. She lifted the girl through the opening. I caught her on the other side, inside a narrow passage lined with shelves. The younger boy followed. His shirt caught on a splinter. He began pulling backward. I covered his mouth and tore the cloth free. Mateo climbed through after him. The grain room door opened wider. Marisol turned toward me and reached backward through the broken window. "Luciano." I took her hand. She pulled while I climbed. For one moment, my ribs caught against the remaining wood. Her grip tightened instead of releasing me. I twisted sideways and fell into the passage beside her. The scarred boy came through last. A lantern appeared in the grain room just as his feet cleared the opening. The person carrying it did not call out. The light merely stopped. Then the golden-eyed man laughed. Not loudly, not with surprise. It was a small, pleased sound. The laugh of a man whose clock had struck at the hour he expected. "Move!" We ran through the pantry. Shelves of clay jars and hanging herbs narrowed the passage. Mateo struck one shoulder against a sack of flour. Dust rose around us. The younger boy inhaled sharply and began to cough. Marisol dragged him beneath a preparation table and pressed her sleeve over his mouth. Slow. Breathe through the cloth. Footsteps entered the pantry. Not hurried footsteps. The calm pace frightened us more than running would have. The little girl crawled against me beneath the table. Her shoulders shook each time the younger boy fought another cough. Mateo covered his own mouth, though he made no sound. A pair of polished black boots stopped on the other side of the hanging tablecloth. No one breathed. A hand moved several jars on the shelf above us. Glass touched glass. One jar was lifted. Its lid scraped against clay. Then the jar returned to its place. The scarred boy looked at me. He knows. I nodded. The boots moved toward the other end of the pantry. Marisol waited until the footsteps faded. "We go before he comes back." She pulled the tablecloth aside. The pantry door ahead stood open. Every other door had been locked. "Why that one?" I asked. "Because it is open." "That is not what I asked." Marisol looked at me. "Then ask while we move." That was how we began becoming necessary to one another. I saw danger in every opening. She saw death in remaining still. Alone, either instinct might have destroyed us. Together, they would carry us farther than either of us understood. We passed into the kitchen. The hearth still held red coals. Dough rested beneath cloth on a long table. A knife lay beside a pile of chopped onions. Voices gathered in the courtyard as Esteban's body was lifted onto the cart. Mateo pointed toward a servant's corridor. "That goes behind the front room." "And the courtyard?" Marisol asked. "Through there." The kitchen door opened behind us. We entered the corridor. It was narrow enough that our shoulders brushed both walls. The younger children stumbled over each other in the dark. Marisol kept one hand behind her until the little girl found it. I followed last and pulled the door closed. The latch settled. A moment later, something touched the other side. We heard the golden-eyed man's voice through the wood. "Better." "Mejor." Mateo moved faster. His shoulder brushed the wall and knocked loose a flake of plaster. It struck the floor behind us. The handle of the kitchen door turned once. It did not open. The corridor split near a staircase. One route climbed toward the rented rooms. The other descended beside the front tavern. Both doors were locked. Marisol pulled one handle and then the other. Footsteps approached behind us. Mateo searched the wall. There was another sound.
What sound?
Wood scraping. I heard it when they brought the sheets. He pressed both hands against the narrow panel beside the stairs. Nothing happened.
Marisol joined him.
The footsteps came closer. Mateo moved his hand lower. The panel opened. Behind it waited a cramped storage passage with folded sheets stacked along one side. We entered and closed the panel. The footsteps reached the staircase. Someone tried the first locked door, then the second. No one opened the hidden panel. The passage led toward a small square of gray light. We crawled between linen bundles until we reached another door. It was unlocked. The scarred boy stared at it. Every door is locked, except the ones they want us to use. Marisol placed her hand on the latch. I looked at her. Where does it go? I do not know. That is what he wants. What do you want? The sound of the panel opening behind us answered for me. Marisol pulled the door. Morning air struck our faces. We emerged beneath a covered walkway beside the courtyard. Esteban's funeral procession was passing through the main gate. 4 men pushed the wooden cart. His mother walked beside the body, with one hand resting upon the white cloth. Villagers followed, carrying candles protected inside jars. Some still wore the clothes in which they had slept. One old man carried no candle. He carried Esteban's folded coat. The Republican sergeant stood near the front doors with his written statement rolled beneath one arm. He watched the procession leave, but did not join it. The cracked bell above the courtyard arch moved in the morning wind. It made no sound. Some bells are broken so completely that even grief cannot persuade them to speak. Marisol drew us behind a line of hanging blankets. The cloth concealed us from the sergeant and the workers near the gate. Through the fabric, Esteban's mother continued repeating her son's name. Esteban. A wheel crossed the courtyard stones. Esteban. The cart reached the threshold. Esteban. The gate remained open behind them. The golden-eyed man's footsteps entered the covered walkway behind us. Marisol moved. We ran beneath the hanging blankets. We passed the empty wash basin. One corner of a blanket caught around Mateo's neck. The cloth concealed us from the sergeant and the workers near the gate. I tore it free. We crossed behind the funeral mourners. For one moment, we became only another group of village children following the dead. Marisol reached backward without looking. I took her hand. She did not release mine until we passed through the open gate. The road lay ahead of us. No wall. No hidden room. No adult standing close enough to command us. Freedom is often described as a feeling. That morning, it was a distance. We left the procession at the first bend and ran into a narrow lane between adobe walls. Mateo stumbled. His knee struck the ground. He stood before anyone could help him. The younger boy complained that his stomach hurt. The scarred boy lifted him beneath one arm without being asked. The little girl's bare feet struck the cold earth beside Marisol. Marisol slowed enough to keep her from falling. That was the first lesson the golden-eyed man took from us. Marisol would shorten her own escape for someone smaller. He learned it before she understood it about herself. A door slammed behind us. We turned into another lane. Hooves struck stone somewhere near the mesón. Mateo looked back.
Do not, the scarred boy said.
Do not what? Keep looking back.
Why?
That is how they know you are scared. Mateo's breath caught.
They already know.
Then stop telling them again. Mateo faced forward. We ran until the town thinned into fenced fields and dry pasture. The funeral procession continued toward a low hill where a small chapel stood among mesquite trees. We moved in the opposite direction. For several minutes, nothing followed us. The lane widened. Wet grass brushed our ankles. Mud gathered between our toes. The little girl laughed when a flock of birds rose suddenly from the field. Mateo turned toward her. He opened his mouth to tell her to stop. Then he closed it. Freedom did not arrive like thunder. It arrived as cold air inside our lungs. It arrived as mud beneath our feet. It arrived as a child laughing without first checking whether an adult permitted it. It lasted less than 10 minutes. A horse called from behind us. Marisol pulled the little girl toward a dry irrigation channel. We slid down the bank and crouched beneath reeds while a rider crossed the road above. We saw only his boots beneath the horse's belly. The animal stopped. No one moved. Water had once passed through the channel. Only cracked mud remained. The younger boy's stomach tightened beneath the scarred boy's hand. A small sound escaped him. Marisol covered his mouth with her palm. The rider turned his horse. Then the golden-eyed man laughed somewhere beyond the reeds. The horse continued. We never saw who rode it. He knows where we are, Mateo whispered. Marisol crawled forward through the channel.
Then we keep moving.
I caught her sleeve. He is pushing us this way.
Then we move before he gets closer.
That is what he wants. Standing still is worse. She pulled her sleeve free. I followed. There are moments when knowing a choice has been prepared does not make it less necessary. That is how cages become roads. We moved through the channel until it crossed beneath a low stone bridge. On the other side, an old shed leaned beside a field of maguey. We hid inside long enough to hear riders pass on both roads. The warmth from the meal had become heaviness in our limbs. Mateo's eyes closed whenever he stopped moving. The younger boy bent over and vomited a little broth into the dirt. He began crying before anyone spoke. Marisol wiped his mouth with her sleeve. You were sick. It came out. That was not your fault. I wasted it. No, you kept what you could. The boy looked toward the dirt. Marisol moved her foot over the wet patch and covered it with dust. Now no one can see. The scarred boy watched her. Something changed briefly in his face and disappeared. Mateo studied the shed's rear wall. There is a gap. We passed through it into another field. A wooden gate stood open. The scarred boy stopped. No. Marisol turned. Again? A rider passed the road. The shed was open. The wall had a gap. Now the gate is open. He looked at me. You see it? I did. A strip of cloth had been tied around one gatepost. It stirred in the wind. The knot looked fresh. Behind us, a door creaked inside the shed. Marisol pushed through the gate. We followed. The golden-eyed man did not need to force us toward the road. He only needed to make every other direction feel worse. The field narrowed between a stone wall and a dry creek bed. Hooves sounded behind us again. The little girl stumbled. Marisol caught her before she struck the ground. I looked back. No rider had entered the field. The sound continued anyway. It moved when we moved. Someone wanted us to hear it. We reached the creek bed and climbed toward a dirt road. A freight wagon appeared around the bend. It was nothing like the covered cart from the church. Two brown horses pulled a broad wooden wagon beneath a crooked canvas roof. Crates were tied along the sides. Burlap sacks bulged beneath the rear flap. A bundle of farm tools had been fastened beside one wheel. The driver wore a wide straw hat and a faded work shirt. We did not recognize him. Marisol ran into the center of the road and lifted both arms. The horses snorted and pulled against their harnesses. The driver cursed and dragged on the reins until the wagon stopped several feet from her. "What are you doing, niña?" "Please, we need to leave." The driver looked beyond her at the rest of us, climbing from the creek bed. Mateo leaned against the scarred boy. The little girl held my sleeve. The younger boy could barely stand. "Leave where?" "Anywhere." A horse sounded behind the stone wall. The scarred boy turned toward it. "Now." Marisol grabbed the side of the wagon. "They're coming! Please!" "Just take us away from here." The driver studied her. He looked at the mud on her dress. He looked at the younger boy. Then he looked toward the road behind us. "Get in." He said it too easily. I knew that even then. But fear can make a suspicious answer sound like mercy. Marisol climbed first and pulled the little girl over the wooden rail. Mateo helped the younger boy. The scarred boy remained beside the rear wheel. "This is wrong." Marisol reached toward him.
Everything is wrong.
He stared at her hand. Hooves struck the road beyond the bend. The scarred boy took her hand. I climbed in last. The driver lowered the rear canvas behind me. Morning disappeared. The wagon smelled of coffee beans, onions, old rope, and damp wood. Crates had been stacked along both walls, leaving only a narrow space through the center. We pressed close together as the driver returned to his seat. Then I heard breathing. Slow, patient, not one of ours. At the far end of the wagon, someone sat between two towers of cargo, with his legs crossed and his hands resting loosely in his lap. His eyes were closed. The silver chain across his vest moved gently as the wagon settled beneath our weight. Marisol stopped breathing. Mateo made a small sound behind me. The golden-eyed man smiled without opening his eyes. How generous of the road. The driver snapped the reins. The wagon began moving. To send you a helpful stranger at the precise moment you needed one. Marisol threw herself toward the rear canvas. The scarred boy caught her around the waist before she could fall beneath the wheels. I stepped between the golden-eyed man and the two smaller children. His smile widened. "Did you truly believe freedom would stop beside the road because you raised your hands?" "You left the wall open," Marisol said. "Slightly. The doors." "Some locked, some open." I stared at him. The gate. A gate is only useful if someone chooses to cross it. "You chased us." His golden eyes opened. No. Gold appeared in the darkness. I encouraged you. From inside his coat, he removed a folded strip of cloth. The stain across it had dried nearly black. I knew the cloth. Days earlier, when the carriage struck a rut and my teeth cut my tongue, he had caught a little of the blood on that same strip of linen. I had forgotten it. He had not. My blood. He raised the cloth beneath his nose and breathed in slowly. The scarred boy turned his face away. The golden-eyed man looked directly at me. Doors can lie, Luciano. He inhaled again. Drivers can lie. Roads are especially talented. A quiet laugh moved through the wagon. Fear lies most beautifully of all. Blood is considerably less imaginative. You followed us with that? Among other things. Marisol stroked the crate again. Then we never escaped. You escaped the room. She stared at him. He folded the cloth once and rested it across his knee. That part was yours. Do not insult yourselves by pretending otherwise. His gaze moved to Mateo. You remembered the stable door. You heard the laundry passage. You also slept during your watch. Mateo looked down. His fingers began tapping against his leg. 1, 2, 3. You count when the world frightens you. Mateo stopped tapping. Do not stop. Mateo looked at him. A habit that keeps your mind intact is not weakness. Allowing others to interrupt it is. His attention moved to Marisol. You moved before certainty could stop you. You protected the smaller children, even when doing so slowed you. I would do it again. I know. That is why it may be used against you. Marisol's face hardened. He looked at the scarred boy next. And you knew it was a trap before any of them. The boy said nothing. Why did you follow? His fingers tightened around his sleeve. They would have gone without me. For one moment, the golden-eyed man's amusement faded. He studied the boy as though the answer had not been included in his expectations. Interesting. The scarred boy lowered his gaze. Then the golden-eyed man's eyes settled on me. You noticed every opening was too convenient. Yes. You knew someone was choosing the route. Yes. Yet you crossed every doorway. I said nothing. He glanced toward Marisol. Because she did. Marisol looked at me. I looked away first. There are truths a child will defend against any enemy and still hide from the person standing beside him. I had distrusted the path. I had followed because she was already on it. Marisol stepped toward the golden-eyed man. You think this proves we belong to you? No. Then what does it prove? He looked around at us. That Mateo sees patterns until fear breaks their shape. That you move before others are ready. That Luciano questions every command, but becomes predictable when someone weaker requires him. He nodded toward the scarred boy. And that one understands the cage better than the rest of you. Yet he still followed the flock through the open door. The scarred boy's face tightened. We are not a flock. Of course not. The golden-eyed man raised the blood-stained cloth once more. A flock is easier. The younger boy began crying silently. Marisol sat beside him and pulled him against her shoulder. The little girl moved between us and rested one hand against my arm. She kept it there, as though confirming that I had not disappeared. "What happens now?" Marisol asked. The golden-eyed man leaned back among the crates. "Now you finish the food you carried from the room. We are not hungry. You will be." The wagon struck a rut. The crates shook around us. One clay jar knocked softly against another. Mateo lifted his head. "Where is this wagon going?" The golden-eyed man closed his eyes again. "Where you were going before you complicated the morning." The little girl whispered.
Santa Lucia?
Yes. No one spoke. The golden-eyed man placed the cloth back inside his coat. I watched until it disappeared. For years, I believed that little strip of linen was how he had tracked us. Later, I understood that blood had been only one leash. Fear was another. Hunger, exhaustion, the instinct to protect someone weaker. A skilled jailer does not rely upon a single lock. Through a narrow tear in the canvas, I watched the fields move backward. The road behind us was empty. Far across the land, Esteban's funeral procession climbed toward the chapel among the trees. His mother still walked beside him. The folded imperial coat hung over the old man's arms. She had fought to remove the uniform strangers wanted remembered. We had fought to escape the names strangers had prepared for us. Neither struggle ended simply because a gate had opened. Marisol sat close enough for her shoulder to touch mine. She did not look at me. "You knew." I thought so. "You still followed." "So did you." "I did not know. You would have gone anyway." She thought about that. Yes. Her hand rested on the wagon floor between us. After a moment, my fingers settled beside hers. They did not touch. They did not need to. The golden-eyed man spoke without opening his eyes. "You should both learn to whisper more quietly." Marisol glared at him. His smile returned. Outside, the driver snapped the reins. The wagon turned away from the mesón and toward a road none of us recognized. We had crossed the hidden wall, the stable, the grain room, the pantry, the courtyard. We had hidden from lanterns. We had slipped beneath the eyes of soldiers. We had passed through an open gate beside a dead boy whose mother refused to surrender his name. For several minutes, we believed the road belonged to us, but every opening had pointed in the same direction. Every unlocked door had been another finger guiding us toward the waiting wagon. That morning, I learned the difference between an exit and an invitation. We escaped the mesón together. We simply had not escaped him.
Otros nacen en la herida.
Time is strange that way. A morning can last only a few hours and still follow you for nearly 170 years. Most days disappear without asking permission. Others refuse to die. This was one of those days. The road to Santa Lucia waited ahead of us. And what waited there would take considerably more than a morning. But that, mis chacales, belongs to another page. If you intend to keep turning them with me, subscribe. I have nearly 170 years of stories. It would be unfortunate for you to lose your place now. Until next time, Miss Chacales, remember your names. Someone else is always willing to choose them for you.